Well, today I'm highly honoured and grateful to have with me Phil Dobbie, the astonishing and versatile man behind BNet's staggeringly popular and always entertaining BTalk Australia daily management podcast. Phil is a unique, intelligent, thought-provoking, good-looking guy. He started his career in commercial radio in the UK, and since coming to Australia in the early 90s, he's turned this country around. Who wrote this?
And it's good stuff, though, isn't it?
It's good stuff. He has driven major success stories for the likes of Telstra, Aussie Mail, the British Tourist Authority, and other telecommunications, media, travel, and advertising businesses who frankly wouldn't exist today if Phil hadn't been around.
They wouldn't.
So when it comes to mastering podcasts and how they help your business, Phil has stacks of relevant experience on both sides of the microphone. And although his work doesn't come cheap, your business will most likely fail if you don't enlist Phil's services in the next month or so. Phil, thanks for joining me.
What a marvellous introduction.
Wasn't it?
Did you write that all yourself, did you?
Nearly, yes. I had a little bit of help, actually.
Did you? Oh, it's very good. I'd hire whoever that writer is.
I'm sure you would, yes. So Phil, look, podcasts, subjects of podcasts.
Yeah.
Who do you think, what's the kind of ideal business to use podcasts?
Well, I think it's a useful medium for anybody, any business really, because every business has to have a presence online, and increasingly, we're looking for richer media content on our websites, and everyone starts to instantly think rich media on a website. Let's stick a video in there, which is fine, but it can be expensive. Time consuming to produce. Podcast has the beauty that it's another medium that we're familiar with. We all listen to the radio, so why not listen to a bit of audio while you're on a website?
So video is certainly kind of flavour of the month, isn't it, online? But it's not overtaken podcasts, and it's not diluting the impact of podcasts at all, really, is it?
Well, I think, again, looking at the difference between radio and TV, radio's still around and radio will always be around. People will always, and it's horses for courses. It's a different medium for different applications. The beauty of audio on a website is that you can carry on surfing while you're listening. So long as you design your podcast in a way where if you click off that page, you're still going to be able to listen to it. So in other words, put the podcast in a little pop-up window, so you can carry on moving around your site while you're listening to somebody talking about the business. In a way, you're taking 2 or 3 senses at the same time. So it's a good cheap way of getting more pervasive message across about your company.
Okay, and so obviously you work, I know, with a lot of businesses to help them put podcasts on. But do you see many people kind of doing a DIY version, do-it-yourself version? I mean,
well, there's a lot of it out there because it is so easy to produce, or relatively easy to produce. But what tends to happen then, there's a few common mistakes that I see. I mean,
tell us, what are they?
Well, I mean, number one is just the quality of the sound and how it's produced. So people who are using cheap microphones, talking off mic. Maybe the MD of the company who's just talking into his laptop computer, as a talk, almost like a talking head, which may
not be the most arresting sort of.
Well, it
delivery.
may not. I mean, maybe some people aren't necessarily animated talkers, and even those who are, they need somebody else to fire off. So I mean, it tends to work that an interview situation like we're in now is a lot more entertaining than just watching one person talk, because you have people to fire off each other.
So other pitfalls, sound quality is the first one.
Yeah, just the way it's actually presented as well. So very often people will go, oh well, I'll create it as an MP3 file. I'll stick it on my website as an MP3 file and ask people to download it, rather than embedding a player into your website. So I mean, you've got to assume that a chunk of people are going to want to listen to it straight away. They're not going to want to wait while a large file downloads before they can even start to play it. And if you don't embed a player, then you're assuming that they've got an MP3 player on their computer that they can play.
And I think I read some stats recently that the vast majority of people do actually listen whilst at their computer, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
So this notion of everybody running around with an iPod in business is not necessarily quite the case.
Yeah, well, it's funny, isn't it? Because we call them podcasts, whereas 9 times out of 10 people are not listening to them on their iPod. I think it's a term that's stuck, but increasingly we are. And while we're on that, it's not just podcasts on sites. I mean, internet radio as well. People, as a medium, people are getting more used to listening to audio on their computer. Almost every year for the last few years. Well, every year for the last few years.
Every year,
it's almost doubled the number of people listening to internet radio.
So we're talking about some pitfalls. We talked about latterly kind of the technology side of it. You know, initially the quality. What else do we need to look at?
I think the subject matter obviously is key as well.
Yes.
You know what you're actually talking about.
Yes.
And I think there again, it's to if you just put a sales message that's just a blatant sales message, you're not going to, and no one's going to believe it. The same as if you do it in writing. So you've got to give it a bit of a journalistic flavour. You know, and so things like you know what makes your product so different. Perhaps putting it into context with something which is a bit more topical, or perhaps including to make your message more believable, include some of your clients. Yeah. You know, actually put together a podcast where perhaps the MD of the business is talking about what they did for a client, and at the same time having the client say, you know, well, this is how the impact it's had on our business. So everyone then gets an understanding of what it is you can provide and what the real benefits are for them.
And I know with a number of yours that you do it where you're interviewing people over the phone as well. So again, you don't have to be in the same place to do all this, do you?
Well, yeah, I mean that is part. I mean, the real beauty of podcasting is it can be quick and easy to produce, and so you can have a high turnover of content. So for example, the work I'm doing for BNet, I'm producing a podcast a day on a different management subject every day, and you know that's probably an extreme example to produce something daily, but people get used to the idea that there's a regular turnover of content. So that gives another opportunity for a business if you're in an industry where there's you know there's people hankering for more information about that particular industry vertical. You've got an opportunity not just to produce a podcast about your particular product, but about your particular sector, and be seen as the thought leaders in the sector. You know, if you make something which is a bit more newsy and topical, you could be producing a podcast a week, for example, about. Is
there kind of an ideal length? How many minutes? I mean, do you have a thought on that?
Well, I mean, again, it depends on the subject matter, who your target market is. I mean. Traditional radio, you know, folk will tell you that if an interview goes on for longer than 6 minutes, the interview's going on for too long.
Well, thanks, Phil Dobbie, for doing it.
Yeah, that's right. But then obviously this is such a fascinating interview because you always have such intriguing guests. Yeah. That you know that you can go on longer, and so it really does depend on the situation. Yeah.
Any last minute pitfalls that we should look out for? Mistakes that you observe?
No, I think we've covered most of them. I guess the key one is that that like anything, you get and I'm bound to say this because I make a living out of doing this, but enlist somebody who can help you to get the best result. Okay. But it doesn't need to be expensive. And I guess the other thing as well, there is a halfway house between producing an audio podcast and producing a video. When we think of producing videos, we think of this sort of setup where you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 17 people in the in the crew, script writers, lighting people, and all that sort of stuff. And major operation that this is, and it can be an expensive operation to produce good quality video, but you can produce a good audio track that people can be surfing around your website listening to, and at the same time you can produce a video to go with it, which might be making use of existing footage that you've got,
or a slideshow even.
Yeah, almost like a PowerPoint, a slightly enhanced PowerPoint slideshow. So you're halfway between that full video production and an audio only production. I think that's that's where there's a real opportunity, because the one thing we can be certain of for everybody's website, people will be calling for more multimedia content.
Okay, Phil, thank you so much. Now, which of your many websites should we go to find out more about your professional services in this area?
Well, phildobby.com is probably or actually podcast.phildobby.com is probably the best place to go to.
Okay, that's great. Phil, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.